What if a simple seat on an airplane became a test of dignity, courage, and identity? Not a courtroom, not a stage, just one seat, bought fairly, waiting quietly at the front of the plane. For Maya Ellis, a 16-year-old girl traveling home, that seat turned into a battlefield. A stranger demanded she give it up. The crew backed the demand. Whispers rose in the cabin. All at once, she was no longer a passenger, she was a question mark. In that moment, Maya faced the choice we all dread. Do you surrender to avoid conflict? Or do you hold your ground and risk standing alone? Think about it. How many times in your life have you been asked, in subtle or sharp ways, to step aside, to accept less, to stay quiet? And what if your child, your grandchild, was the one being told to move? This is not just a story about a flight. It's about the fight to belong, about courage that begins in silence, and about the moment when one choice can spark change for many. Join us as we uncover Maya's journey. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss these powerful stories. Maya Ellis had always thought of airplanes as something magical. Not the kind of magic with wands and spells, but the kind that came when you looked out a window at 30,000 feet and saw the world shrinking beneath you. She loved that quiet moment before takeoff, when everything was still and the hum of the engines felt like a heartbeat under her feet. On this particular afternoon, she sat in the seat 1A of a Skylink Airlines flight departing from New York to Los Angeles. She had never flown alone in first class before. Her father usually traveled with her, or at least her mother. But today she was making the trip to visit her aunt on the West Coast. Her father had insisted she take the best seat, not because of status, but because he wanted her to feel comfortable and safe. The seat was wide, soft leather, with more space than she knew what to do with. A bottle of water rested on the tray, beads of condensation sliding down the side. Maya tucked her backpack neatly beneath the seat and pressed her hands together, trying to calm her nerves. She was 16, confident in school, comfortable on stage during debate tournaments, but sitting in this polished space, she could feel the eyes of strangers. She glanced around the cabin. To her right, a businessman was scrolling on his phone. Across the aisle, an older couple whispered about vacation plans. Everyone seemed at ease, as if they belonged here. Maya took a quiet breath and reminded herself that she belonged too. Her father had booked this seat for her. There was nothing unusual about it. Just as the boarding door closed, a shadow fell across her. A woman stood in front of her row. She was in her late 50s, dressed in a cream-colored blazer and pearl earrings that glistened beneath the overhead lights. She didn't smile. "That's my seat," the woman said firmly, pointing to 1A as if it had her name engraved on it. Maya blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, my boarding pass says 1A. The woman's lips tightened. She turned her head slightly, addressing a nearby flight attendant as if Maya wasn't there. "This young girl must be mistaken. I always sit here. Seat 1A is mine." The attendant, a tall man in a Navy uniform, leaned forward politely. "Ma'am, let me check." He looked at Maya. "Miss, may I see your boarding pass?" Maya fumbled for her phone, opened the app, and handed it over. The attendant scanned it, nodded, and returned it. "It says 1A, correct." She seated properly. The woman's eyes narrowed. "That can't be right. I am a Diamond Elite member. I always sit here. Surely there's been some mistake." Maya shifted in her seat, her palms suddenly damp. She didn't want a scene. She didn't want people staring. She could feel the weight of the other passengers' eyes now. Curious. Waiting. "Ma'am," the attendant said softly, "your seat is 1B, right next to this one." But the woman didn't move. She leaned down slightly, her voice low but sharp enough for Maya to hear. "Sweetheart, people like you usually sit in the back." The words stung, quick and cutting, though the tone was delivered with a polished smile. Maya felt her chest tighten. She stared down at her hands. She thought of her father's voice echoing in her mind. "Never give up your place just to make someone else comfortable. If you've earned it, you belong there." The woman straightened, looking around as if to gather sympathy from nearby passengers. "This is ridiculous. I shouldn't have to sit squeezed next to someone else. This girl can take the aisle seat. Move her." Another attendant walked over. She was older, with a practiced smile that barely reached her eyes. She looked at Maya the way people look at someone they've already judged. "Miss, perhaps it would be easier if you sat in 1B instead. That way, our valued member can have her usual seat. It won't make a difference." Maya lifted her gaze, steady though her heart was pounding. "It makes a difference to me," she said quietly. The attendant's smile thinned. "We're just trying to make the boarding process smoother." Maya said nothing more. She folded her hands in her lap, refusing to move. The cabin was quiet now, the air heavy. Some passengers pretended to look at their phones. Others watched openly, curiosity mixed with discomfort. No one spoke. No one challenged the unfairness. The woman huffed, dropped her expensive handbag into seat 1B with a dramatic sigh, and sat down. But not before muttering under her breath, "Unbelievable." Maya kept her eyes on the window. The city skyline was fading, the late afternoon sun turning the clouds gold. Her throat was tight, but she did not let herself cry. She had chosen to stay where she was, and even if no one defended her, she knew she had not done anything wrong. Still, she could feel the tension. The attendants passed by, polite but distant, skipping over her when offering drinks. She pressed her fingers together, steadying herself. Inside, her thoughts swirled. Why is it always like this? Why do I have to prove I belong every single time? She remembered her father's words again, said at the kitchen table just a week ago. "Maya, the world may try to move you, but you must know your worth is not negotiable." And so she stayed, silent, calm on the outside, though her chest ached with a quiet storm. The engines roared to life. The plane began to taxi. From the corner of her eye, she could see the woman beside her scrolling through emails with furious taps, still muttering about entitlement. Maya closed her eyes. This was only the beginning of the flight. She didn't know yet that this moment, this ordinary seat, this silent resistance would ripple far beyond the cabin walls. The plane lifted into the sky, engines vibrating beneath the floor, buildings shrinking to toy size as the city dropped away. Maya pressed her cheek against the cool window and exhaled slowly. For a moment, she tried to let the thrill of takeoff wash over her. Flying usually made her feel small in a good way, part of something bigger. Today, it only reminded her of how exposed she felt. Beside her, Evelyn Stokes adjusted the seat controls with exaggerated sighs. She leaned into her glass of sparkling water, handed to her almost immediately after takeoff. The flight attendant smiled warmly at her, pouring from a chilled bottle, then turned and walked right past Maya without asking if she wanted anything. Maya's lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. She noticed the small details, the way the attendant's eyes slid over her as if she were invisible, the way Evelyn's glass caught the light like a reward for superiority. She folded her hands in her lap and tried to steady the heaviness inside her chest. A few rows back, passengers murmured about weekend plans and business meetings. The hum of voices carried forward, blending with the low drone of the engines. It was a normal flight for everyone else, but for Maya, every gesture felt sharpened, every glance from the crew a quiet question. "Do you belong here?" The senior attendant, Jacqueline Hartman, approached again, this time with menus. She smiled at Evelyn, offering 2 options for lunch with the warmth of a practiced host. When she turned to Maya, the smile dimmed. She didn't hand her a menu. She only asked, "Would you prefer something simple? We have sandwiches available." Maya blinked. I'd like to see the menu. Please." Jacqueline hesitated, then handed it over, her expression unreadable. Evelyn gave a quiet laugh, the kind meant to be overheard. "You know, sweetheart, the first-class meals can be a bit much. Maybe something simpler would suit you." Maya's fingers tightened on the edge of the menu. She didn't reply. She read through the options: grilled salmon, roasted chicken, a vegetarian pasta dish. She chose the chicken, her voice steady, though her stomach churned. As Jacqueline scribbled the choice onto her notepad, she asked Evelyn, "And for you, ma'am?" The older woman ordered salmon, then added with a pointed glance toward Maya, "Please make sure it's the best cut." The words were casual, but Maya caught the underlying tone. It was as if Evelyn wanted everyone nearby to know who deserved priority. The minutes stretched. Drinks and meals were served row by row. Evelyn received hers on a polished tray with cloth napkins, silver cutlery, and a small dessert already tucked beside the plate. Maya's tray came 10 minutes later, lukewarm, the chicken dry, and no dessert in sight. She stared at it, then quietly moved her fork, lifting a small bite. She chewed slowly, forcing herself to swallow the lump in her throat. Her mind drifted back to her father's stories. Jordan Ellis rarely spoke about his early years, but when he did, his voice carried a quiet gravity. He had once told her about his first time flying first class as a young executive, the way attendants had assumed he was lost, how one man had asked if he was carrying bags for someone. He had laughed about it years later, but she had seen the hurt flicker across his face. Now, sitting here, Maya understood. These small humiliations, an absent smile, a delayed tray, a careless remark cut deeper than open insults. They left scars invisible to everyone else. Evelyn leaned back in her seat, scrolling her phone, glancing occasionally at Maya with a look that mixed curiosity and disdain. Finally, she said, "Where are your parents? Dear, did they actually buy this ticket for you?" Maya turned her gaze from the window, her voice calm but firm. "Yes, my father bought it." Evelyn's eyebrows lifted, skepticism plain. "Well, that must have been quite a stretch for him. Seats like this don't come cheap." The words slipped into Maya's chest like ice water. She felt her pulse quicken, heat rising behind her eyes. She wanted to lash out, to say something that would shatter the smugness on Evelyn's face. But she didn't. She steadied her breath. Her father's words replayed again. "Your worth is not negotiable." So instead, she said simply, "It wasn't a stretch." Then she looked away, ending the conversation. The silence that followed was thick. Evelyn shifted, unsatisfied with the lack of reaction. and muttered something under her breath that Maya couldn't quite catch. As the flight stretched on, attendants passed up and down the aisle. One offered Evelyn a refill of champagne without being asked. Maya's water bottle remained empty. She pressed the call button once, hesitated as the light blinked above her, then turned it off. She didn't want to give them another chance to dismiss her. She sat back, listening to the soft clink of cutlery, the muted conversations. A group of businessmen behind her chuckled loudly at some joke, the sound grating against her frayed nerves. She closed her eyes, trying to block it all out, but even in that stillness, a thought gnawed at her. Maybe I should have moved. Maybe it wasn't worth it to fight. Then another voice rose inside her, sharper, stronger. If you move once, you'll always be asked to move again. If you give up your seat now, you'll be giving it up forever. Maya opened her eyes. She stared at the small tray in front of her, the half-eaten chicken, the untouched bread roll. She wasn't going to cry, not here, not now. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the plane reached cruising altitude. Attendants moved through with blankets and pillows. Once again, Maya was bypassed. Evelyn was handed a soft pillow and a folded blanket. Maya sat without either, arms folded, the chill of the air conditioning sinking into her skin. It wasn't just about comfort. It was about being seen or not seen. She shifted in her seat, pulling her backpack up from beneath her feet. Inside was a photo of her family, her father smiling with his arm around her mother, Maya standing in the middle, braces still on her teeth, grinning wide. She looked at it now, grounding herself. She whispered, so quietly that no one could hear. I belong here. I do. The words steadied her. She slid the photo back into her bag and rested her head against the seat. She didn't know how much longer she could sit in silence, but she also knew she couldn't back down. A faint vibration buzzed through her phone in the side pocket of her bag. A message from her father lit the screen. How's the flight safe so far? Maya's fingers hovered. She wanted to tell him everything, but she typed only, I'm fine. Don't worry. Then she paused, deleted the words, and started again. Dad, they're treating me differently. Just because I'm me. She hit send before she could change her mind. Then she sat back, heart pounding. The storm wasn't over. In fact, she sensed it was only just beginning. The hours in the air stretched like a taut string, each moment vibrating with an uneasy stillness. Maya Ellis sat with her eyes fixed on the small window beside her, watching endless layers of white cloud roll beneath the plane. Her reflection stared back at her faintly in the glass, a quiet reminder that she was still there, still holding her place. The cabin was hushed, broken only by the shuffle of footsteps and the clink of glasses. Yet, beneath the surface, the tension felt alive. Every time a flight attendant walked past without looking at her, Maya felt the dismissal like a gust of cold wind. And every time Evelyn shifted in her seat with a huff or a muttered comment, it was another reminder that her presence in 1A was being tolerated, not respected. She tried to close her eyes, to let her mind drift, but the sounds around her pulled her back. Across the aisle, the older couple were laughing at something on a tablet screen. Behind her, the businessmen were still talking loudly about stock prices. The world was moving on, and she was sitting in silence, carrying the weight of words that no one else seemed to hear. Her tray, still cluttered with the remains of her dry chicken meal, hadn't been cleared. When she finally caught the eye of a young male attendant, he gave a quick nod but never returned. Evelyn's tray, by contrast, had been cleared within minutes, replaced with coffee and a small plate of fruit. Maya pressed her palms against her knees, grounding herself. She thought of how easy it would be to surrender, to simply let go of the fight. She could switch seats. She could accept the smaller courtesies denied to her. She could make herself invisible, and perhaps the hours would pass more gently. But then she remembered her father's voice, always calm, always steady. The world will ask you to move, Maya, and sometimes it will ask softly, with a smile. But remember, each time you move when you shouldn't, you teach them it's okay to push you again. Her chest ached. She wanted to believe she was strong enough to keep sitting there, but she was only 16. The loneliness of that realization pressed heavy on her shoulders. She wasn't a CEO like her father. She wasn't powerful. She was just a girl in a seat, trying to prove she belonged. The senior attendant, Jacqueline Hartman, returned to check on Evelyn, crouching slightly to speak to her in hushed tones. Maya heard fragments comfortable. "Anything else you need?" Evelyn smiled sweetly, the kind of smile she had never shown Maya. Jacqueline stood, her eyes flicking briefly toward Maya before looking away. She moved down the aisle, leaving behind a trace of silence that was almost louder than words. The absence of intervention from the other passengers was what stung the most. There were at least 20 people in first class, each watching in some way, each hearing enough to know something wasn't right. Yet none of them spoke up. Some avoided her eyes altogether. Others gave small, sympathetic looks, but that was as far as their courage stretched. It reminded Maya of a story her mother once told her about high school. How she had stood alone in the cafeteria when no one wanted to sit with her because of her hair, her skin, her presence. The silence of others hurts almost more than the cruelty itself. Her mother had said, because silence tells you you're not worth defending. Now, sitting in seat 1A, Maya understood those words in a way she hadn't before. She shifted slightly, pulling her phone from the pocket of her bag. Her father hadn't replied to her message yet. Perhaps he was in a meeting. Perhaps he was traveling. She typed again, her thumbs hovering. They made me sit in the back for a while. They said 1A wasn't mine. I moved back because they told me to. But then they let me come forward again. I don't know how much longer I can take this. Dad. She stared at the message, then erased the last sentence. She didn't want to sound weak. She wanted him to be proud of her. She retyped, "They're treating me differently, but I'm staying calm." Then she sent it. The plane hummed on. Hours still remained before landing. At one point, Evelyn leaned toward Jacqueline and whispered something, both of them glancing briefly at Maya. They chuckled softly. The sound was low, but it carried sharpness, a deliberate reminder of exclusion. Maya bit her lip. She wanted to stand, to shout, to demand fairness. But a part of her feared that if she did, she would be the one punished. She would be labeled disruptive, rude, difficult. She would become the problem, not the woman who had questioned her right to exist in that seat. The thought made her stomach twist. She looked again at her reflection in the window, eyes glistening but unbroken. She whispered under her breath, so faintly that even she barely heard it. "I'm not moving. I belong here." Minutes passed. The hum of the engines blurred into white noise. A blanket of quiet fell over the cabin, broken only by the occasional cough or clatter of utensils. The flight was steady, the night sky outside stretching wide and endless. Inside, Maya's thoughts swirled darker. Why do I have to prove myself every time? Why is sitting in this seat enough to spark doubt, suspicion, disdain? For the first time, a flicker of anger rose stronger than fear. Not loud, not wild, just steady, like a flame she could hold in her chest. She clenched her fists gently against her lap, feeling that fire steady her spine. Her phone buzzed at last. A message from her father appeared on the screen. Don't let them shake you. I'll handle this. Stay where you are. Maya's breath caught. She read the words twice, then 3 times. Relief washed over her, but with it came a strange mix of emotions. Gratitude, yes, but also a sting of frustration that it always took her father's shadow to command respect. She set the phone back down, whispering, I'll stay. The cabin's silence returned, but it felt different now. She wasn't only sitting quietly anymore. She was waiting. The storm was building. Maya sat still in her seat, her phone resting against her palm, the hum of the engines filling her ears. The silence of the cabin had become a weight pressing down on her chest. She knew her father's message was more than just reassurance. It was a signal. He was going to act. Still, she hesitated, staring at the glowing screen as her heart drummed. Was it fair to pull him into this? Would it make things worse for her, here, surrounded by strangers? But then Evelyn shifted beside her, letting out another one of those theatrical sighs, this time pressing her call button. Jacqueline appeared almost immediately, bending to listen, her tone warm and attentive. Evelyn's words carried just enough volume for Maya to hear. Honestly, it's distracting having her here. She doesn't understand the culture of this cabin. Maybe you should move her before someone else complains. The sting of it lit fire under Maya's skin. She could feel the heat rising to her face, but she stayed quiet, clinging to her father's message like a lifeline. Don't let them shake you. Stay where you are. Her thumb hovered, then pressed the call button on her phone. It rang only once before her father answered. Maya. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, like steel under velvet. Dad, she whispered, keeping her eyes on the window so Evelyn wouldn't see her lips move. They're still pushing me. They keep treating me like I don't belong here. For a moment, there was silence on the other end. Then Jordan Ellis spoke, his words steady, deliberate. You've done everything right. You've stayed calm. Now listen to me carefully. You don't need to do anything more. I will handle this. Maya swallowed hard. But, Dad, no buts. Baby girl, you stay seated. Don't argue. Don't move. Just breathe. I'll make a call. His confidence wrapped around her like a shield. She nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Okay, I'm proud of you, he said softly. I'll be in touch. The line went dead. Maya slipped her phone back into her pocket, her pulse racing. She felt both relief and nervous anticipation. What was he going to do a few minutes later? She noticed a change in the air. The young male attendant walked briskly toward the front, whispering to Jacqueline. Jacqueline's face stiffened, her eyes darting toward Maya, then back toward the galley. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, curiosity flickering across her face. The intercom crackled. Jacqueline, please report to the cockpit. The captain's voice was clipped, formal. The supervisor straightened her jacket and hurried forward, her heels clicking softly against the carpet. The businessman across the aisle glanced up, sensing something unusual, but quickly returned to his tablet. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds sat rigid in his chair, headset pressed against his ear. Jacqueline slipped in, her smile polite but uneasy. "Yes, Captain." He gestured to the phone connected to the console. "Corporate security is on the line. They've requested to speak with you regarding a passenger issue." Jacqueline blinked, confused. A passenger issue. What kind? The captain's expression didn't soften. "Seat 1A." Her heart sank, but she took the receiver. "This is Jacqueline Hartman, senior attendant, flight 227. The voice on the other end was crisp, authoritative. "Jacqueline, this is Robert Vance, head of security for Skylink Airlines. I'm calling under direct instruction from CEO Jordan Ellis. We have received a report regarding treatment of passenger Maya Ellis. I need you to confirm her current seating and the actions taken since boarding." Jacqueline's throat tightened. "She's in 1A, as per her ticket. There was some confusion with another passenger, but it was resolved." Resolved, Vance's voice cut sharp. "We have multiple reports indicating she was pressured to move, denied services, and subjected to discriminatory remarks." "Is this correct?" Jacqueline hesitated. The silence on the line stretched like a blade. "Ma'am," Vance said, his tone ice-cold, "you will answer truthfully. Mr. Ellis is listening." Her stomach twisted. "Yes," she whispered. "There were comments, and she was asked to consider moving." There was a pause. Then Vance said, "Jacqueline Hartman, by authority of Skylink leadership, you are suspended effective immediately pending investigation. You will step down from supervisory duties for the remainder of this flight. Another crew member will assume your role. Do you understand?" Jacqueline's knees went weak. She stared at the captain, who gave a small nod. Her voice cracked. "Yes." "Good," Vance said. "Return to your post and await further instruction." The line went dead. Jacqueline left the cockpit, her face pale, her movements stiff. The cabin seemed louder now, the hum of the engines pressing at her ears. When she returned to the galley, the younger attendant was waiting. His eyes widened at her expression, but she said nothing, only handed him her supervisor's pin. Back in her seat, Maya felt the shift before she knew the details. Jacqueline didn't come near her again. The younger attendant, now acting in her place, approached with a nervous smile and set down a fresh tray steaming pasta, a warm roll, and a slice of cheesecake. "For you, Miss Ellis," he said quietly, almost apologetically. Maya blinked, surprised, but managed a soft, "Thank you." Evelyn's head whipped toward the tray, her eyes narrowing. "Why is she getting dessert when I didn't?" she demanded. The attendant swallowed, his voice polite but firm. "All passengers are entitled to equal service, ma'am." Then he turned and walked away. The older woman bristled, crossing her arms. She muttered under her breath. But Maya didn't catch the words. It didn't matter. For the first time that day, she felt seen. She picked up her fork, but her appetite was thin. More than hunger, she felt the steady thrum of anticipation. Her father had started something, and it was far from over. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds exhaled slowly, gripping the controls. He'd flown for 30 years, but he had never seen intervention like this. A CEO calling mid-flight, suspending crew in real time, it was unprecedented, and yet he couldn't deny the rightness of it. His eyes flicked briefly to the manifest taped beside his seat. Passenger 1A Maya Ellis. The name carried weight he hadn't recognized before. Back in the cabin, Maya leaned against her headrest, clutching her phone in her lap. Her father's last words echoed inside her. "Stay where you are. I'll handle this." For the first time since boarding, she believed it. Captain Thomas Reynolds kept his hand steady on the controls, but his mind was racing. In all his years flying across oceans, he had never experienced direct intervention from corporate leadership mid-flight. He had heard of CEOs demanding better wine lists or board members complaining about flight delays. But this was something entirely different. A teenage passenger in Seat 1A had triggered a chain of calls powerful enough to suspend a supervisor while the plane was still in the air. And the voice of Robert Vance, clipped and commanding, had made it clear Jordan Ellis himself was watching. Thomas adjusted his headset and cleared his throat. "Flight operations, this is Captain Reynolds. I need clarification on the level of oversight for passenger 1A. The response came immediately. "Captain, you are to treat passenger Maya Ellis with the highest level of protocol. Her travel is being monitored directly by the executive office." Thomas frowned. He had known the name Ellis. Of course, most people in aviation did. Jordan Ellis, co-founder of Skylink, had built the airline from nothing alongside a handful of partners. But he hadn't known about the daughter. No one had said anything during the pre-flight briefing. She was just another name on the manifest. Until now. "Understood," he said, his voice low. He switched off the channel, his eyes narrowing as he considered what this meant. Back in the cabin, Maya sat quietly, the untouched cheesecake in front of her. She could feel the curious eyes of passengers flicking toward her and then away. The shift in the crew's demeanor hadn't gone unnoticed. Evelyn shifted in her seat, uncomfortable now that her complaints had lost their weight. For the first time, the silence seemed to lean in Maya's favor. Jacqueline sat stiffly in the galley, no longer given orders, her pin tucked into her pocket. The younger attendant carried himself with a mix of nervousness and new responsibility, approaching passengers with more balance, offering drinks and blankets without discrimination. But the air still buzzed with something unspoken. It was more than a correction of service. It was the sense that something bigger was at play. Maya's phone buzzed again. A new message from her father lit the screen. "Stay calm. In a few minutes, you'll hear something. Don't be surprised. Just remember who you are." She frowned, her stomach tightening. What did he mean? Minutes later, the intercom chimed. The captain's voice filled the cabin, steady and formal. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking. I want to take a moment to address an important matter. We have been contacted by corporate leadership regarding a situation that occurred earlier in this flight. It concerns passenger 1A, Miss Maya Ellis. For the sake of transparency and to maintain dignity for all passengers, I will share this with you directly." The cabin froze. Forks paused midair. Heads turned. Evelyn's eyes widened. The captain continued. "Miss Ellis is not only a valued passenger, she is also a registered shareholder of Skylink Airlines. She represents the very legacy of this company. Any mistreatment directed toward her is not only a violation of policy, but a failure to honor the principles on which this airline was founded. Effective immediately, new directives are being enforced to ensure every passenger, regardless of age, race, or background, receives the respect they deserve." Gasps rippled through the cabin. A businessman, 2 rows back, straightened in his seat. The older couple across the aisle exchanged glances. Evelyn turned pale, her hand gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles whitened. Maya sat frozen, her heart pounding. Shareholder. The word echoed in her mind. Of course she knew her father's role, knew he had built Skylink from the ground up, but she had never thought of herself as part of that world, not in any formal way. Now, the captain had declared it to the entire cabin. Everyone was looking at her differently. The announcement ended and the intercom clicked off. Silence fell, thick and heavy, then, slowly, a smattering of applause began, hesitant at first, then building. A few passengers clapped politely, though others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, uncertain of what to do. Evelyn leaned toward Maya, her voice low and sharp. "You could have said something earlier." Maya turned her head, meeting her gaze calmly. "I shouldn't have had to." Evelyn's lips parted, but no reply came. She sat back, defeated. The younger attendant appeared again, setting down a fresh glass of sparkling water in front of Maya with both hands, a gesture of respect. "On behalf of the crew, Miss Ellis, I apologize. You should never have been made to feel unwelcome." Maya nodded, her throat taut. "Thank you." Her phone buzzed once more. This time, it wasn't a message, it was a call. She hesitated, then answered softly. Dad Jordan's voice filled her ear, calm but powerful. "I wanted you to hear it with your own ears. Now they know who you are, but more importantly, they know you wouldn't move, even when they tried to push you." Maya blinked back, the heat rising behind her eyes. "Dad, I didn't do anything special. I just stayed in my seat." "That's enough," Jordan said firmly. "Sometimes the greatest act of courage is refusing to move. You carried yourself with dignity. That's more powerful than raising your voice." She let out a shaky breath. It didn't feel powerful. It never does, in the moment. He replied, "But remember this. The quiet strength you showed today will echo louder than any outburst. People saw it. They'll remember it." For a long moment, she sat in silence, the weight of his words settling in her chest. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds received another call from corporate. Robert Vance's voice was steady. "Captain, further action is authorized. Upon landing, supervisors will meet the crew involved. Evelyn Stokes is to be flagged for permanent removal of elite status due to repeated complaints verified through prior records. Do not inform her until the ground team boards." Reynolds nodded. Understood. When Jacqueline heard, her stomach clenched. She had thought the suspension was temporary, just a slap on the wrist. Now she realized this was bigger than her, bigger than one flight. She glanced toward Maya and saw not just a passenger but a mirror of the company's conscience. The cabin settled into a quieter rhythm, but the balance had shifted completely. Maya leaned back, staring at the clouds, her mind reeling. She hadn't wanted to be the center of anything. She just wanted to sit in her seat and fly like everyone else. Yet now, she was the fulcrum of something larger, a moment where silence had been broken. Her father's voice echoed again in her memory. "Your worth is not negotiable." This time, she believed it. The applause had faded, but the air inside the first-class cabin remained charged, as though an invisible current threaded between the rows of seats. Maya could feel it pressing against her skin, heavy with awareness. Every movement she made the shift of her hand to lift her glass. The quiet crossing of her legs seemed to draw attention. It wasn't the stairs that made her uneasy, though. It was the silence that followed them. A silence she now understood carried weight. Evelyn sat rigid beside her, lips thin, eyes darting toward Maya with a mix of bitterness and disbelief. She shifted in her seat as though she no longer fit there. For someone who had demanded another passenger's removal, Evelyn suddenly seemed like the intruder. The younger attendant passed by again, offering blankets to anyone who needed them. Evelyn snapped, "You forgot mine earlier." The attendant gave her a courteous nod but didn't rush to oblige. Instead, he leaned slightly toward Maya. "Miss Ellis, would you like one as well?" Maya shook her head politely. "I'm fine, thank you." He moved on, leaving Evelyn fuming. The shift was subtle, but it was unmistakable. Power had changed hands. From the back of the cabin, a man in a Navy suit, a mid-level corporate manager by the look of his lanyard, stood and approached slowly. Clearing his throat, he addressed Maya with a respectful nod. "Excuse me, Miss Ellis, I just want to say I'm sorry you had to go through this. I've flown often enough to see how people are treated differently. Though I've never spoken up. I should have." Maya blinked, startled. Passengers turned their heads, listening. The man continued, his voice low but firm. "Watching how calm you stayed, it made me realize silence isn't neutral. It protects the wrong side." A murmur rippled through the cabin. The older couple across the aisle exchanged a meaningful glance. Then the woman leaned forward. "He's right. We all saw what happened. It wasn't fair." For the first time that day, Maya felt her throat tighten, not with anger, but with the sting of validation. Strangers had finally broken their silence. Evelyn bristled, her voice sharp. "Oh, for heaven's sake. She's just a girl. You're all acting like she's some kind of hero because she sat in a seat she shouldn't have been in." The cabin fell still. Dozens of eyes turned to Evelyn, their patience thinning. Maya took a breath, steadying her voice. "I was in the seat I paid for, ma'am. The one my father bought for me, the same way he could for anyone else. I never asked to be treated special. I only asked to be treated the same." Her words were quiet, but they carried. Even the businessmen behind her stopped tapping at their tablets to listen. Evelyn flushed, shifting uncomfortably. "Well, maybe if you'd explained who your father was sooner, none of this would have been an issue." Maya's gaze was steady, her tone measured. "Why should I have to prove who my father is to sit in a seat that was mine already?" The question lingered, heavy and undeniable. No one spoke at first. Then the businessman across the aisle, the one who had been glued to stock charts earlier, lowered his voice. "She's right. That's the whole point." Captain Reynolds's voice cut in over the intercom, calm but carrying authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, I ask that you remain respectful toward all passengers. We are under direct review from corporate leadership, and every action on this flight is being logged. Let us move forward with courtesy." The reminder wasn't only for Evelyn, it was for the entire cabin. The captain's words served as both warning and reassurance. Everything was being watched. Evelyn turned sharply in her seat, her cheeks blotched red. She pulled a silk scarf tighter around her neck, muttering, "Unbelievable." The tension began to shift again, this time not toward silence but toward exposure. The businessman in the Navy suit returned to his seat, but his words seemed to embolden others. A younger woman leaned over from 2 rows back, her voice kind but firm. "Miss Ellis, I saw the way Jacqueline spoke to you earlier. It wasn't right. I didn't say anything at the time, and I regret it. But you handled yourself better than most adults would have." Maya's chest swelled with conflicting emotions, gratitude, disbelief, and a quiet ache. She nodded, whispering, "Thank you." Evelyn let out a bitter laugh. "You're all fallen for this act. She's milking it. You'll see." The words hung in the air like poison, but this time the cabin did not stay silent. The older woman across the aisle snapped, "Enough. We've seen plenty. You've embarrassed yourself enough already." Evelyn's jaw dropped, her authority unraveling. For years, her platinum elite status had given her leverage, the power to command deference. Now, in front of strangers and crew alike, she was stripped of it. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Captain Reynolds received another message through his headset. Robert Vance's voice was crisp. "Captain, ground teams have been alerted. Upon landing, passenger Evelyn Stokes is to be escorted off for formal debrief. She has a record of repeated complaints and disruptive conduct. Her status will be revoked." Reynolds nodded silently, acknowledged. He couldn't help but think about the young girl in 1A. Maya hadn't shouted. She hadn't raised her hand in protest. She had simply sat still, refusing to move from where she belonged. And that quiet act had brought an entire system into view, exposing fault lines that ran deeper than one passenger, one crew member, or one flight. Back in the cabin, Maya felt the air shift once more. The oppressive weight of silence had lifted, replaced with something else uneasy but promising. People were speaking now. People were choosing sides, and for once, she wasn't alone in the fight. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced down to see her father's words. "I see the shift. Hold steady. You've already done more than you realize." She closed her eyes briefly, drawing in a deep breath. She didn't know how this would end, but she knew one thing: whatever happened next, she would not move. The announcement came 30 minutes before landing. Captain Reynolds's calm voice carried through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have begun our initial descent into New York. Please ensure your seat belts are fastened. Cabin crew, prepare for arrival." It was the kind of routine message that usually signaled relief the end of a long flight, the promise of solid ground. But this time, the words layered over an atmosphere that was anything but routine. Every passenger in first class seemed to sit a little straighter, aware that the drama unfolding in the air would not end once the wheels touched down. Something awaited them at the gate. Maya Ellis pulled the strap of her seat belt across her lap, her fingers trembling slightly. She stared at the tray table, folded neatly against the seat in front of her, and tried to steady her breath. The hours since boarding felt like a lifetime. She had been ignored, pressured, defended, revealed, and applauded, all within one enclosed cabin at 35,000 feet. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from her father. "Ground team will board before passengers disembark. Don't be afraid. Just sit steady. Everything else is out of your hands now." She exhaled slowly, her heart thumping against her ribs. Out of her hands. That should have been comforting, but it carried its own weight. What would they do to Evelyn, to Jacqueline? And what would it mean for her, the girl who hadn't asked for any of this, who only wanted to sit where she belonged? Evelyn, by contrast, was unraveling. Her scarf was loose, her cheeks flushed. She pressed the call button 3 times in quick succession until the younger attendant appeared. "Yes, ma'am," he asked politely. Evelyn leaned forward, her voice sharp but hushed. "I need to speak to the captain immediately. This is unacceptable. I won't be treated like a criminal when I've done nothing wrong." The attendant kept his composure, though his jaw tightened. I'm afraid the captain is busy with descent procedures. Please remain seated." Evelyn glared, muttering under her breath, "This airline is finished. You'll all regret this." Her words earned nothing but silence. Even the passengers nearby, who earlier had kept their eyes down, now openly turned away from her. The plane began to tilt, the nose dipping gently toward the earth below. The hum of the engines deepened, joined by the faint rattle of overhead bins. New York twinkled faintly in the distance beneath scattered clouds. As the seatbelt sign glowed, Maya pressed her palms against her knees, grounding herself. The voices around her blurred into background noise. She thought of her father in some high-rise office, commanding entire teams with a single call. She thought of her mother's gentle reassurance, always reminding her that strength didn't have to roar. And she thought of herself, sitting in Seat 1A, a place that had become something much more than just a seat. The landing gear lowered with a groan. The wheels kissed the runway, bouncing once before gripping hard. The plane slowed, engines roaring, then softened into a steady taxi. A collective breath released through the cabin, but for Maya, it wasn't relief, it was anticipation. The plane came to a stop at the gate. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Passengers shifted, standing, reaching for bags, but before anyone could move farther, the intercom crackled again. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We will have a brief delay as corporate ground supervisors board the aircraft." A ripple of confusion spread through the cabin. Passengers exchanged glances. Murmuring, Evelyn's face drained of color. She clutched her handbag like a shield. Moments later, the cabin door opened. 3 figures in dark suits stepped aboard, their ID badges clipped neatly to their jackets. They walked with calm authority, the kind that drew instant attention without a word. At their center was Robert Vance, his expression unreadable, his presence commanding. "Good afternoon, passengers," he said, his voice carrying easily through the rows. "We apologize for the inconvenience. We have business with specific members of the crew and 1 passenger. Please remain seated as we conduct our review." The younger attendant stiffened beside the galley, but Vance gave him a reassuring nod. Then his gaze cut to Jacqueline, who stood awkwardly near the back. "Jacqueline Hartman," he said, his tone crisp. "You are hereby relieved of all duties, effective immediately. Please collect your belongings and exit with us for formal debrief." Jacqueline's shoulders sagged. She didn't argue. She walked slowly down the aisle, avoiding every set of eyes fixed on her. When she passed Maya, their gazes met briefly. Jacqueline's face was pale, but her eyes held something like regret or perhaps recognition. Then she was gone. The cabin buzzed faintly with whispers, but Vance wasn't finished. He turned next to Evelyn. "Mrs. Stokes," he said, his voice sharp as glass. "Stand up, please." Evelyn clutched her handbag tighter, her voice cracking. "This is outrageous. I am a Platinum Elite passenger. You have no right," Vance cut her off. "You are no longer a Platinum Elite passenger. Effective today, your status is revoked permanently. Your record indicates repeated complaints, abusive language toward staff, and today's discriminatory behavior. You will be escorted for debrief before you may exit this airport." Gasps rippled through the rows. Evelyn's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. Slowly, almost trembling, she rose to her feet. She tried to glare at Maya one last time, but the venom in her eyes had dulled. It was not dominance, it was desperation. 2 agents flanked her gently but firmly, guiding her down the aisle. Her heels clicked against the floor, each step an echo of her unraveling. The cabin seemed to exhale once she was gone. The silence left behind wasn't heavy anymore. It was lighter, as though a storm had passed. Robert Vance turned, his gaze sweeping the passengers. "Thank you all for your patience. We regret that you had to witness such conduct. Skylink Airlines is committed to ensuring dignity and fairness for every customer. Incidents like this are unacceptable. We thank you for your understanding." He gave a final nod, then turned to leave. But before he did, his eyes softened as they fell on Maya. Just for a moment, the steel in his demeanor eased, replaced with quiet respect. Then he was gone. Passengers began to stir, some murmuring about what they had seen, others shaking their heads in disbelief. A few looked at Maya with open admiration. The older woman across the aisle leaned over and whispered, "You handled yourself with such grace. Don't ever forget that." Maya's throat tightened. She managed a quiet, "Thank you." Her phone buzzed again. Another message from her father. "It's over. You did everything right. I'll meet you at the terminal." She leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes briefly. For the first time since the flight began, she felt the full wave of exhaustion crash over her, but beneath it was something else: relief, pride, and the strange awareness that she had carried herself through a storm and reached the other side. As passengers finally stood to disembark, some offered her small smiles, nods of respect, even quiet words of encouragement. It wasn't applause this time. It was something deeper, something lasting acknowledgement. And when Maya stood to gather her bag, she realized the truth. She hadn't just kept her seat. She had kept her dignity. The air smelled different once Maya stepped off the plane. It was sharper, tinged with coffee, disinfectant, and the faint perfume of 1,000 travelers passing through the terminal. But more than anything, it smelled like relief. She had carried the weight of the flight like a stone in her chest, and now, with each step down the jet bridge, that weight seemed to loosen. The passengers filed out around her, some moving quickly as though eager to put the ordeal behind them, others pausing to offer quiet nods or words of encouragement. The older couple from across the aisle smiled warmly as they passed. "Safe travels, dear," the woman whispered, her hand brushing gently against Maya's arm. Maya gave a small smile in return. Though her lips trembled, she still hadn't fully absorbed everything that had happened. The confrontation, the suspension, Evelyn's removal, it all blurred together like pieces of a story that didn't feel real. And then she saw him. Jordan Ellis stood just beyond the gate, tall, composed, his suit immaculate despite the late hour. His presence seemed to command the space around him. People glanced his way without knowing why, sensing authority in his quiet stillness. When his eyes found Maya, however, that authority melted into something softer. She dropped her carry-on and rushed forward. He caught her in his arms, folding her against his chest with a firmness that told her he had been waiting for this moment all day. "I'm so sorry, baby girl," he murmured into her hair. "I should have been there." Maya shook her head against him. "No, Dad, you were there. You handled everything." He pulled back just enough to look into her face, his eyes searching. "But you," his voice caught, "you held your ground. You didn't let them take your dignity. That was all you." Her throat ached, tears threatening. "I almost gave up. I wanted to move. I wanted to disappear, but I kept hearing your voice in my head." Jordan brushed his thumb across her cheek. "That voice wasn't mine. Maya, it was yours. You've had it all along." For a moment, she couldn't answer. The hum of the terminal faded, and all she could hear was the pounding of her heart. They gathered her bag and walked together toward a quiet lounge reserved for airline executives. A guard at the door stepped aside immediately, nodding with respect. Inside, the noise of the terminal vanished, replaced by warm lighting and the soft clink of glasses from a nearby bar. Jordan led her to a corner booth, giving her space to sit while he ordered water and sandwiches. When they were alone, he leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "Tell me everything, from the start." Maya hesitated, then began. She told him about the way Evelyn had confronted her before takeoff, about Jacqueline's pressure, about the silence of the other passengers. She described the feeling of being invisible, of questioning whether she should just move and spare herself the humiliation. Her voice trembled at times, but she pushed through, painting the full picture. Jordan listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening, his eyes darkening with quiet anger, but he didn't speak until she was finished. "You went through all of that," he said slowly, "and you still sat there with your head high. Do you know how rare that is?" Maya shook her head. It didn't feel rare. It felt lonely. His expression softened. "Lonely. Yes, but not powerless. That's the mistake people make. They think power is noise. They think it's shouting louder, pushing harder, but real power is sitting in a seat that's yours and refusing to move, even when the world tells you you don't belong." Maya looked down at her hands. Her fingers knotted in her lap. "But what if I had moved? What if I had just given up?" Jordan reached across the table, taking her hand. "Then it would have been their victory, not yours, and you'd carry that weight far longer than this flight, but you didn't move. That's what matters. That's what they'll remember." Her eyes stung. "People only cared when they found out who you were." "That's true," Jordan admitted, "and it's wrong. You shouldn't need my name for people to treat you with respect, but that's why we fight. Not just for us, for everyone who doesn't have a name to shield them." Maya thought of Jacqueline, her face pale as she handed over her supervisor's pin. She thought of Evelyn, trembling as she was escorted from the plane. But she also thought of the businessman in the Navy suit who finally spoke up, of the woman across the aisle who defended her. Silence had cracked, and in its place, something new had taken root. Jordan's voice broke through her thoughts. "Do you know what the hardest part of my job is?" She shook her head. "It's not building companies. It's not negotiating contracts. It's looking into the faces of people who doubt you simply because of your skin, your presence, your place in the room, and refusing to let their doubt define you." Maya swallowed hard. "That's what it felt like today." He nodded. "And now you know why I've always told you dignity is not negotiable. Ever." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of his words settling between them. Finally, Maya whispered, "I'm scared. Dad, what if this keeps happening? What if everywhere I go, someone tries to push me out?" Jordan's eyes softened, but his answer was firm. "Then you'll do what you did today. You'll hold your ground. And if you ever falter, you'll remember that you don't stand alone. You carry your family, your history, your name, but more than that, you carry yourself, and that's enough." Her chest tightened. But for the first time, it wasn't fear. It was something steadier. Hope. The lounge attendant appeared with their food, breaking the heaviness. Maya picked at her sandwich, appetite faint, but the warmth of the bread grounded her. She caught her father's eyes and gave a small smile. "You know, I think cheesecake tastes better at 35,000 feet." Jordan chuckled, the sound low and genuine. "We'll have to test that theory again sometime, under better circumstances." Her smile grew, though it was tinged with weariness. "Maybe next time. I'll just book a window seat in the back." He shook his head. "No. Maya, you belong in 1A. Don't ever forget it." Her laughter bubbled up, quiet but real. For the first time since boarding, she felt the storm inside her ease. As they prepared to leave, Jordan placed a hand on her shoulder. "You may not realize it now, but today you carried more than yourself. You carried the truth. And sometimes that's all it takes to start change." Maya let his words sink in as they stepped back into the terminal, where travelers bustled past without a second glance. The world outside had no idea what had unfolded in the air above them, but she did. And as her father's arm settled protectively around her shoulders, she realized something else. The seat she had fought for was never just about her. It was about everyone who had ever been told to move when they didn't have to. The next morning, Maya woke to the sound of her phone buzzing nonstop on the nightstand. At first, she thought it was just her friends texting about homework or weekend plans, but when she unlocked the screen, her breath caught. Dozens of notifications filled the display: messages, emails, missed calls, and headlines flashing across news apps. Her name was everywhere. Skylink CEO's daughter, harassed on first-class flight. Teen refuses to give up. VIP seat, airline crew. Suspended mid-air. Passenger confrontation exposes racial bias in luxury travel. Maya sat up in bed, the blanket pooling around her waist. Her heart pounded as she scrolled. There were grainy photos taken by passengers who had clearly recorded parts of the confrontation. In one, she was sitting stiffly in seat 1A, her face calm but pale. In another, Evelyn was being escorted off by ground security, her expression a storm of fury. The captions twisted the images into symbols: courage versus entitlement, dignity versus privilege. Jordan Ellis knocked gently before stepping into the room, already dressed for the day. He carried a tablet under one arm, his face composed but heavy with thought. "You've seen it." I take it Maya looked up at him, wide-eyed. "It's everywhere. Dad, they're talking about me." He sat on the edge of her bed, handing her the tablet. "Not just talking. They're debating. They're analyzing. This isn't just a story, it's a mirror, and you've become the reflection." She scrolled through the articles, her stomach twisting. Commentators on morning shows dissected her composure. Social media was a storm. Hashtags like "Rah Seat Way" and "Ha She Belongs" trended worldwide. Some posts praised her courage. Others shared their own stories of being asked to move, overlooked, dismissed. The collective voices turned her small act into something vast. But with the praise came venom. In the comment sections, strangers accused her of entitlement. Of course, she didn't move. Her dad's the CEO. Would anyone care if she wasn't rich? She played the victim. The words stung. She set the tablet down, hugging her knees. "I didn't ask for this. I just wanted to sit in my seat. Now everyone thinks I'm some symbol." Jordan's gaze softened, but his tone remained steady. "Symbols aren't chosen. Maya, they're made. You didn't ask for this, but now it's here. The question is, what will you do with it? She shook her head. I don't know. I'm just 16. I'm not ready for this. His hand rested on her shoulder. No one is ready, but you don't have to carry it alone. You tell your truth, that's enough. Later that day, Skylink Airlines held a press conference. Maya watched from home as executives stood in front of a wall of cameras, their words rehearsed but weighted with sincerity. We deeply regret the events of Flight 227, said Robert Vance, his voice even. Mistreatment of any passenger is unacceptable. Skylink is launching a full review of crew protocols, customer treatment, and cultural training, effective immediately. We are instituting new protections to ensure dignity and fairness at every level of service. Questions flew from reporters. Was Maya Ellis treated differently because of her race? What role did Jordan Ellis play in the suspension of crew members? Was Evelyn Stokes truly stripped of her elite status? Vance answered each carefully. But the truth was clear. What had begun as a confrontation between two passengers had exploded into a public reckoning for the airline industry. At school, the following Monday, Maya felt the ripple in her own world. Classmates stared as she walked the halls. Some approached with admiration. You were amazing, one girl whispered. Another boy grinned. You're famous now. Everyone's talking about you. But not all the voices were kind. Snide remarks trailed after her. Must be nice having Daddy swoop in to save you. Bet if she wasn't rich, nobody would care. Maya kept her head down, her chest aching. It wasn't the first time she'd been reduced to her father's shadow, but now the spotlight made it heavier. That evening, she sat at the dining table, her homework spread out but untouched. Jordan joined her, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He set one beside her and leaned back, watching her wrestle with the silence. They think I'm only strong because of you, she finally whispered. He sipped his tea before answering. And what do you think? Her voice cracked. I think I only stayed because I heard your voice in my head. I think maybe they're right. Jordan shook his head. No, you stayed because you chose to. My voice was there, yes, but I wasn't in that seat. You were, and you didn't move. Don't let anyone take that from you. Maya blinked, tears threatening. But what if I can't live up to this? What if I'm not who they think I am? His expression softened, but his words were firm. Then don't live up to them. Live up to yourself. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. People don't need a flawless symbol. They need a real one. She looked at him, uncertain. But something inside her shifted. Over the next week, the story grew instead of fading. Civil rights leaders cited her experience in op-eds, calling for greater accountability in air travel. Advocacy groups reached out, asking her to speak. A late-night host even cracked a joke that went viral. Next time someone tells you to move out of your seat, just check if your dad owns the airline first. The audience laughed, but the undercurrent was serious. Maya felt caught between two worlds, the private life she wanted and the public role she couldn't escape. At times, she longed to disappear, to erase the spotlight. But other times, when she read stories shared under the hashtag, "She belongs," like the young mother asked to leave a lounge, or the elderly man denied service because of his accent, she felt something else. Connection, resonance. One night, unable to sleep, she stood by her window, staring out at the city lights. Her phone buzzed again. This time, It was a message from the Navy-suited businessman from her flight. He had found her email through her father's office. "Miss Ellis, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I wanted you to know that because of you. I spoke up at work today when I saw a colleague being dismissed unfairly. It may not seem like much, but it was the first time I didn't stay silent. Thank you for reminding me that silence isn't neutral." Maya read the message twice, her throat tight. In that moment, she understood what her father meant. This was bigger than her, bigger than a seat. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, whispering into the night, "Maybe I can carry this. Maybe I can." 2 weeks later, Maya Ellis stood backstage at a crowded community hall in Manhattan, the murmur of hundreds of voices drifting through the curtain. The auditorium was filled with journalists, activists, students, and ordinary travelers who had come to hear her. Skylink Airlines had announced sweeping reforms, civil rights groups had held rallies, and still the world wanted to hear from the 16-year-old girl who had refused to move from her seat. Maya clutched her note cards, though the words on them blurred. She wasn't sure she would use them. Her palms were damp, her stomach fluttering. She had spoken in classrooms before, even at debate club, but this was different. This was real. Her father stood beside her, tall and steady as ever. He adjusted her collar gently, his touch grounding. "Remember, you don't have to be perfect," he said. "Just be honest." She nodded, exhaling slowly. "Do you think people will actually listen?" "They already are," he replied with a quiet smile. "Now you get to decide what they'll hear." The stage manager gave a signal. It was time. Maya stepped into the lot. The applause rose instantly, a wave that startled her but also filled her with warmth. She walked to the podium, her heart hammering, her throat tight. She set the cards down but didn't look at them. She lifted her gaze, meeting the expectant eyes of the crowd. "Good evening," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "My name is Maya Ellis, and 2 weeks ago, I was just a teenager on a flight, sitting in a seat my father had bought for me." A hush spread across the room. She continued, "I didn't think I was doing anything extraordinary. I just wanted to sit where I belonged. But when someone told me I didn't belong, I had a choice. I could move, or I could stay. And for the first time in my life, I decided staying was worth the risk." Her voice steadied as she spoke, the words flowing easier now. "I wish I could tell you it felt powerful in the moment, but it didn't. It felt lonely, I felt small, and I almost gave up, but I didn't, and that made all the difference." She glanced down at the crowd. She saw faces leaning forward, listening intently. She saw strangers nodding, eyes glistening, and she knew she was not alone anymore. "I'm not here tonight because I'm the daughter of a CEO. I'm here because what happened to me happens to too many people every day. People who don't have a famous name, people who don't have someone powerful to call, people who are told to move, to shrink, to disappear, and most of the time, no one ever hears their story." Her throat tightened, but she pressed on. "That's why I'm speaking now. Not to tell you how strong I am, but to remind us all how fragile dignity can be and how powerful it is when we protect it." Applause rippled through the room, gentle but growing. Maya let it wash over her before continuing. "When I was sitting in that seat, I thought I was fighting for myself, but now I see I was part of something bigger, because silence protects the wrong side. And when we stay quiet in the face of unfairness, We let it grow." She paused, her voice lowering. "I don't want anyone else to feel that kind of loneliness. I don't want anyone else to wonder if they're worth the seat they paid for, the job they earned, the place they deserve. So if my story means anything, let it mean this: you belong. Where you stand, where you sit, where you dream you belong." The applause rose again, stronger this time, carrying her forward. Maya lifted her chin, a spark of confidence blooming. "I'm 16 years old. I don't have all the answers. I don't know how to fix the world, but I know this: the choice to stay, the choice to speak, the choice to stand for someone else that matters. And if enough of us make that choice, maybe the world will change." When she finished, the hall erupted in applause, louder than before, echoing off the walls. She felt the weight of it settle in her chest, not as pressure, but as possibility. Backstage, her father met her with open arms. "You did more than speak. Maya, you gave them something to believe in." She leaned into him, exhausted but glowing. "I just told the truth. And that," he said softly, "is what people remember." Over the following days, clips of her speech spread across the internet. People replayed the line, "Silence protects the wrong side." Schools shared her words in classrooms. Activists quoted her at rallies. Even airline executives from other companies acknowledged the need for reform. But for Maya, the true impact came in quieter moments. The email from a flight attendant thanking her for giving voice to what staff endured in silence. The message from a young girl who wrote, "Because of you, I didn't let them move me from my seat today." The look of pride in her father's eyes when they sat together at dinner. No cameras, no headlines, just family. One evening, as she walked home from school, Maya paused at a small park bench. She sat down, watching children run and laugh, their voices carrying into the crisp air. She thought of the flight, the silence, the confrontation, the storm of media, and then she thought of this laughter, belonging, ordinary life. She whispered to herself, "This is what it's for." So no one has to fight just to sit where they belong. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose. Maya stood, shoulders straight, her steps light. The world had thrust her into the spotlight, but she had chosen what to do with it. And in that choice, she found something stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. She found her voice. The story of Maya Ellis reminds us that dignity is not about power, wealth, or titles. It is about refusing to let others decide our worth. Too often, people are asked to move, not just from seats, but from opportunities, from recognition, from spaces they rightfully earned. Maya's quiet act of staying in her seat became a symbol because it reflects something universal: the need to be seen and respected as equals. For older audiences, this story speaks to memory and legacy. Many of us have witnessed, or even lived through, moments of unfairness, times when silence felt safer than speaking. Maya's courage invites us to reflect: what would the world look like if, instead of shrinking, we chose to stay present? Her choice shows that change often begins not with dramatic gestures, but with the small, steady insistence on our rightful place. The lesson is clear: protecting dignity is everyone's responsibility. Whether in our workplaces, communities, or families, we can create spaces where no one has to question if they belong. And perhaps the greatest gift we can give the next generation is the example of standing firm, so they may never doubt their worth. Thank you so much for watching and sharing this journey with us. Stories like this remind us how powerful respect, courage, and justice can be when we stand together. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter.